say, writing on air from Chapel FM, I'll say it.
So welcome back to Writing on Air. It's been a very joyous evening. We started with the Leeds Leal Cabaret, which filled me with hope, actually. Really reminded me of the importance of places like Chapel FM in these divisive times. So what a wonderful day. Now we're all here for a special edition of Stories from the Sofa, which is a Chapel Allerton event that happens 4 times a year. And we've got a special version of it here tonight. I'm going to pass over to Ruth, who can get us started. So give it up for Stories from the Sofa.
So, we are Stories from the Sofa. We've been going a few years. There is Vickie, and
Matthew,
and myself, Ruth Steinberg. And are you sitting comfortably? Yes. So I'm going to kick off with the first story. This story is from South Africa. It was made famous by Pete Seeger, and it's called Abby Yo-Yo. And Pete Seeger was, does anybody here have heard of Pete Seeger? Yeah. He was, he collected songs and he sang, and he was collected songs of freedom and liberation, and also collected stories. And he made this story famous. So it's called Abby Yo-Yo. In South Africa, there was a village. And in this village, there was a story. Nobody believed it, but there was a story that they used to scare each other with. It was a story about the giant Abby Yo-Yo. Now, Abby Yo-Yo would eat children, would eat farm animals. You had to be very careful about Abby Yo-Yo, but it was just a story. Now, also, in this village, there was a man and his son. Now, the man was a magician. He had one trick. He had a magic wand, and if he pointed at something and went zap, zap, that thing would disappear. That was his one magic trick. Oh, I love this audience. More woos. I love it. But he was also a bit mischievous. He would like to play tricks on somebody. So if he saw that somebody was just about to sit down, say, on a throne, stories from the throne tonight, he would go zap, zap, the chair would disappear, and the person would fall over, cursing him. Oh. Or if somebody was drinking a glass of water, and he'd go zap, zap, the glass would disappear, and you get a soaked person cursing this man. His son was also a bit of a nuisance because for his last birthday, he got a ukulele and he was learning it, right? And you know what, when you start to play a musical instrument, and he loved the ukulele, and he played it all day and all night and went blinky plonky, blinky plonk, blink plonk, blinky plonk, blinky plonk, in the middle of the night, right? The people would lean out the window and say, "What time do you call this?" And he'd say, 3:30 in the morning. So the two of them, they were not the favorites. And it got to such a pitch that the people of the village decided that they had to move from the center of the village and go and live on the edge. Thank you. Now, one day, it was a beautiful sunny morning. The sun had come up, and everybody was happy, and the sun was shining. And then, suddenly, the skies darkened, the earth trembled, and over the hill came Abby Yo-Yo. You could smell him before he came, because he never washed. He had green teeth, because he never brushed them. He had long nails that curled. Thank you, that was a good one, And he came down the hill, boom, boom. And he reached over as he passed the fields and he picked up a sheep. He ate it in one go. Or he'd pick up a cow. He ate it in one go. And everybody in the village was running, help, help, Abby Yo-Yo's here. They were running and running, and the man and his son came out of the hut to see what all the fuss was about. And there they saw Abby Yo-Yo in all his monstrosity. Now, the son said, I've got an idea, Dad. Grab your wand. And so he did. And him and his father, and he picked up his ukulele and they ran towards Abby Yo-Yo. And everybody's saying, no, you'll die. He'll eat you. And Abby Yo-Yo saw the father and his son, and he was just about to reach down and get a little snack when the boy started playing his ukulele. And he started singing a song. Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo. Well, the giant had never heard a song with his name in it, and a big grin spread across his face, and you could see his green teeth. And the boy carried on playing and started to walk round and round Abby Yo-Yo. Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo. And he went round and round. And as he went round, he started singing a bit faster. Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo. And the giant started to dance. And he followed him, and he started going round in circles. Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo, Abby Yo-Yo, Yo-Yo, Yo-Yo. And faster and faster and faster and faster went the giant Abby Yo-Yo. And he went so fast, he got so dizzy that he just fell, boom, on the ground. And quick as a flash, the father came with his magic wand, and he went zap, zap, and the giant disappeared. Hooray! That's what the people of the village said. Hooray! Hooray! And they came running up, and they said, oh, you saved us, you're wonderful. Do come and live in the middle of the village again. Please, you've saved all our lives. And please, don't be as horrible as you were. All right, one or two tricks. All right, a little bit of ukulele. And they all lived happily ever after. So now we have Matthew Bellwood, who's going to give us a little something.
So we have lots of different stories from the sofa. We have songs, and we have folk tales, we have myths, legends, personal reminiscences, live literature, pretty much anything, as long as there's a story in there somewhere. So I thought I'd sing you a little song now, and it's a song that was written by Mike Waterson, of the famous Waterson folk family, and it was written to commemorate a shipping disaster, so it's a little bit of a change of tone from Abby Yo-Yo. And it was the whole triple trawler disaster, which took place in 1968. And 3 ships were lost in January and February of that year. It was, I'm just looking at my notes, the St. Romanus, the Kingston Peridot, and the Ross Cleveland. And 58 sailors were lost at sea. There was only one survivor of that disaster. And really it came about because the economic conditions of the time meant that the ships put to sea when it wasn't safe. And the thought is that the buildup of ice on the boats caused them to sink. So this was the tribute that Mike Waterson wrote to the sailors who lost their lives in that disaster. I saw 3 ships come sailing by, come sailing by, come sailing by. I saw 3 ships come sailing by so early in the morning. And the masts and the spars were all hung with crystal, ice-cold crystal, glittering crystal. The masts and the spars were all hung with crystal early in the morning. And the crews were all paid up in silver, ice-cold silver, glittering silver. The crews were all paid up in silver early in the morning. And I wonder what's the weight of gold that a tongue can hold. To keep a story so untold of early in the morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Vickie now, who's going to tell you part 1 of an amazing story.
Right, well, it's a change of mood again. My story is many, many moons old, but the folk in the region, they still talk about this. And really, I suppose it all started with Fran and her mother. Now, Fran's mother had baked some pies, but when they came out of the oven, they were all slightly overbaked, and the crusts, well, the kindest thing you could say probably was that they were hard as nails. So Fran's mother said to Fran, just put those pies in the larder and they'll come again. And then she went back out in the yard to carry on with her spinning. Now, what she should have said to Fran was, put those pies in the larder, and after a few hours, the crusts will soften. But that isn't what she said. And, well, you know that smell of fresh pies when they come out the oven, and especially if you know what the filling is, eventually, Fran could resist no longer, and he just thought, well, Mother said that the pies had come again. It won't hurt to just have one pie. And you know what it's like. You can't just have one pie when they're that delicious. And she ended up eating all of the pies. But it doesn't matter because they're going to come back again. Mother said they're going to come back again. Now, her mother, come late afternoon, came in after hard work at the spinning wheel and said, oh, do you know, I'm absolutely ravenous. I could just eat one of those pies. Fran, will you go and purchase one of those pies from the larder? And Fran says, well, I can't, Mother. They've not come again. Oh, don't worry. I'll just bring one anyway. Well, I can't because they've not come. Oh, best or worst, I don't mind. I am so hungry. I could probably eat all of them. Just bring us one here. Well, I can't, Mother, because they haven't come again. What do you mean? Well, I ate them all. You said they'd come again, but they haven't come again. There's just empty dishes there. Oh, you foolish girl. And with that, her mother went back out and sat at the spinning wheel, furiously spinning. My daughter, she has eaten five pies. My daughter, she has eaten five pies. Now, the king happened to be coming past the house, And he heard the mother singing. He said, what's that you were singing? I heard you say something about your daughter. Well, there was no way Fran's mother was going to admit what she'd been singing. So she said, oh, my daughter, she has spun 5 skeins today. Oh, my daughter, she has spun 5 skeins today. My stars, said the king, that is some going. I mean, the most talented spinners I know, well, they're lucky to spin 2 skeins a day. And I tell you, I've been looking long and hard for a wife. And, well, if your daughter looks anything like you, then I'm sure we will rub along well together. And so Fran's mother summoned her, and Fran looked up at the king, and the king looked up and down at her, and he said, I would like to make you my wife. But I tell you what we'll do. For 11 months of the year, you can have as much food as you want whenever you want. You can have a brand new gown whenever you want. You can have a new gown every day if you want. And you can keep the company that you choose, and I won't interfere. But at the end of the 11th month, you will spin for me 5 skeins a day. Otherwise, your head will come off. Does that sound like a deal? Well, Fran's mother was that excited about the thought of her daughter marrying the king. She said, oh, yes, now that's no problem. And the king trotted off and set about arranging the marriage. And Fran turned to her mother, and her mother said, don't you worry. 11 months is a long time. He's bound to forget about it. 11 months in love with you, his mind will go blank. And if it doesn't, well, I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement. And so it was. Fran married the king. And sure enough, she ate as much as she wanted, whenever she wanted. She didn't quite have a new gown every day, but probably more or less every week. And she kept the company that she chose, and it was all fine and dandy. And the king never once mentioned about the spinning. Oh, thank goodness he's forgotten about it. But come the last day of the 11th month, the king took Fran to a room in the castle she'd never seen before. It was a cold room. It was a small room up a high tower with a tiny little window, and in it was nothing but a spinning wheel and a stool. And the king said, do you remember our deal? Well, tomorrow you will be locked in here. In the morning, I'll bring you some food and refreshment, and I will bring you some flax, and you will spin for me 5 skeins by the end of the day. Otherwise, your head will come off. Well, Fran was absolutely shocked. She took herself away down to the back of the castle. She'd never spun in her life, and she sat down and she wept and she sobbed until she heard a knock low down on the door. And when she opened the door, there was a little creature, the likes of which she'd never seen before, all leathery skin and a long tail that it was twirling round and round. What are you crying for? It's none of your business. Go away. I might be able to help you. I doubt it very much. Well, just tell me, give it a try. And so she thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. And so she told him the whole story. And the little creature, its eyes darting here and there, its tongue flicking in and out. I can spin 5 skeins a day. Yeah, but what do you want in exchange for it? Oh, I tell you what. If at the end of the month you haven't guessed my name, I'll marry you. But to make it fair, every evening I'll give you 3 guesses at my name. Well, Fran, she didn't have any choice, really, did she? So she thought, well, 3 guesses over a month. I mean, it can't be that hard. There can't be that many names in the world, surely. And so the deal was struck. Come the morning, The little creature would arrive on our windowsill. She would give him the flax, and he would fly off, and come the evening, return with the skeins. So on the first night, right, 3 guesses. What's my name? Is it Billy? Tain't. Is it Ned? Tain't that neither. Is it John? No. Try again tomorrow. And so it went on. Halfway through the month, he asked again, okay, what's my name? Is it Samuel? No, tain't. Is it Thomas? Tain't that neither. Is it Amos? Tain't that either. And as the month grew, as the end of the month grew closer and closer, well, the little creature's eyes, they got to be more greedy, and a kind of evil grin spread across its face. And each evening her husband would come and he would collect the skeins, and he said, oh, I am so pleased. I can see I'm not going to have to kill you after all. Oh, this is excellent. And then on the penultimate evening he said, look, you're doing so well, and I'm sure that I'm not going to have to cut your head off. Let's eat together. And so he brought a stool, and the two of them sat down to eat. And no sooner had the king put the first spoonful in his mouth than he burst out laughing. And Fran looked at him and said, you'll never guess. You'll never guess what happened to me today. Well, I was out hunting, and I came to this bit of the forest. I've never ever been there before, never come across it. And well, there was this chalk bit, and you'll never guess what I saw. In the bottom of the chalk bit, there was this little creature. Oh, a wizened thing it was. Long tail it had, and you're not going to believe this, but it got a tiny little spinning wheel, and it was spinning wonderfully fast. And as it was spinning its tail round and round, and it was singing the most peculiar song I have ever heard. It was singing, get this right, it was singing, nimmy, nimmy, not, my name's Tom Tit Tot. Nimmy, nimmy, not, my name's Tom Tit Tot. Well, Fran could barely keep a straight face. And so, come the next morning, the little impic creature flew onto the ledge and took the skeins away. And come the evening, the look on its face, it was ready for its prey. Have you guessed my name? Now, Fran pretended to be right afeard, and she said, I don't know. Is it Simon? Tain't Simon. Is it Nathaniel? Tain't that neither. You're going to be mine. Niminy, niminy, not. Your name's Tom Tit Tot. Well, the creature was furious. It screeched like a banshee and flew off into the night. And Fran never saw it again. And that is that for now.
So I thought I'd do another song now. This is slightly different in tone to the other one. And it's a song called Down by the Dark Arches. And I first came across this in a book called Leeds Described, as a sort of eyewitness account of Leeds in the past. And it was in the 19th century, late 19th century, which is when the Dark Arches under the railway station near Granary Wharf were built. And since seeing that, I've since discovered that it was a favourite song of a very well-known folk singer from Norfolk. So I suspect it may not have been written about Leeds at all, but I like to think that it was. And it's a slightly ribald song, and it's a joining-in song as well. So I wondered if you would be able to help me out with the chorus, which is very, very simple. It just goes, singing tooralai, ooralai, ooralai. Can we have a go at that? Is that all right? So 1, 2, 3. Singing tooralai, ooralai, ooralai. Beautiful. Thank you. So we'll sing that at the end of each verse. I'll give you a little nod. As I walked out one day in the month of July, a pretty young damsel I chanced for to spy, singing villikins and diners so blithe and so gay, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. Then I stepped up to her, so gay and so free, and for the same ballad I paid 1 halfpenny. Will you be my sweetheart? To her I did say, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. Oh no, my gay young man, that cannot be. There's a chap here in blue and he's a watching of me. And if he should see me, what would he say? Down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. At last she consented, away we both went. 5 shillings in lobsters and oysters I spent. 6 drops of brandy for her I did pay, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. Then in came a chap with a black eye and a stick. He drunk up my brandy and broke my pickwick. Pop goes the weasel, to me he did say, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. I lay in the gutter till 4 in the morn, as naked as ever a poor creature was born. And when I awakened, quite still there I lay, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. 4 bobbies came up, and to my surprise, I found I'd no shirt on to cover my thighs. They put me on a stretcher and bore me away from beneath the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. I sent to my mother for money and clothes, likewise to a doctor to patch up my nose. You have not had fair play, to me he did say, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. Now all you young chaps, take a warning by me. Never go a-courting when you're on a spree, and never take young ladies out of their way, down by the dark arches under the railway, singing toodle-I-oodle-I-oodle-I-ay. Thank you. Beautiful singing, thank you. I think we have another story from Ruth now.
So, this story is one of my favourites. It's a Native American story, and I came across it. It was back in the 80s, and there was an oratorio written about this story. The story's called Jumping Mouse, and the oratorio was called The Awakening, written by Jack Glover and Martin Riley. And it is such a strong story, I decided I was going to learn to tell it. So here it is. Let me take you to Mouseland. Let me take you to the capital of Mouseland, which is a citadel, and it's surrounded by a very tall, high stone wall. And if you were to look inside, you'd see all the mice running. Their whiskers were twitching and their tails up in the air, and they were running round the lanes and up the stairs and round the streets, and they all had a job to do. They all had messages. It was a very well-organized place, and everybody knew what their place was and what they had to do, and they were busy, busy, busy. Except for one mouse. Now, this mouse tried to be a good mouse, but it was always late. It was always forgetting things because it was a curious mouse. It couldn't resist just having a little look around the corner to see what was there or investigating something interesting. And he tried to be good, and he kept saying, I'm sorry, I will be better. And one day he was on one of his messages, and he was running around, and he found himself by a corner, and he couldn't resist. He had to look around, and he found himself by the outside wall. And the door, the one door into the mouse citadel, was open just a bit, but enough for him to squeeze through and go and stand outside. And he was astonished. He could see for so far. He saw trees. He had never seen trees before. He felt the wind on his face. And he looked down the valley and he could see a glint of something. He didn't know what it was. The sky was so wide, and he's standing there full of curiosity and wonder. And he heard a little bit of music, just very quietly. But this got louder and louder. And there was singing, and there was musicians, and from over the hill came a parade, a carnival, with all the animals, different animals wearing different coloured costumes. They had flags, they had ribbons, and there was a band that was playing and came closer and closer and closer. And our little mouse was just standing, oh, my goodness. And before he knew what was happening, some hand had grabbed his and pulled him into the parade. And he was part of this carnival with people laughing and singing. And they went down and down and down the valley to the bottom. And as quickly as he'd been pulled in, he fell out, tripping over a big stone. And the carnival went on its way and went up the hill and over and got quieter and quieter until it was quiet again. Well, quite dazed, our little mouse was lying there, and he heard a voice saying, hello? Hello, who are you? And the mouse looked up, and it was a frog. And he says, well, I'm a mouse, and who are you? Well, I'm a frog. Would you like to play? And the mouse said, oh, okay. So the frog did some jumping and jumped and jumped and jumped, and the mouse joined in, and they jumped and jumped and jumped until they were exhausted and they fell over laughing. And then the frog said, can you jump like me? And the frog crouched down very, very low, and he jumped up in the air and got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then got bigger and bigger and came back down again. So the mouse says, well, I don't know, I'll try. So the mouse crouched down, and he jumped up in the air, and just at the top, the apex of his jump, he saw far, far away, he saw the peaks of the Misty Mountains. And the vision of the amazing Misty Mountains burnt itself into his mind. And he came back down, but he didn't land on the ground. Splash! He fell into the river and was swept away. And our little mouse was going round and round and round this way, and then round and round and round that way, until he was spat out by the river, and he just lay there, exhausted. After a little while, he stood up, and he shook his fur, and he looked to see where he was. And he was on the edge of a very, very wide, big, big prairie. And right in the far, far distant edge of the prairie, he could see the misty mountains. Well, he was so far away from home, he didn't know, he couldn't get back home, he didn't know how to do that. And this vision, he wanted to see, our curious mouse wanted to see the misty mountains. So he set off, and on his little legs, he walked and walked and walked. Well, he had no water, he had no food, and the sun was rising, and it was hot. And he walked and walked and walked until he could not walk any further. He was exhausted. And he looked and he saw, just not very far away, there was a hillock that threw a shadow. And he thought, oh, I'll just lie here. And that's what he did. He lay with his back against the hillock in the shade away from the sun. And he was just falling asleep when this hillock started to shake. And he jumped up and he looked, and it was not a hillock. It was a buffalo. And the buffalo said, what are you doing here? And the mouse told him everything. Told him when he just came out of the citadel, and about the parade, about the carnival, about the frog, about falling into the river, but most of all, his wish, his desire to see the misty mountains. And the buffalo said, well, I know the way to the misty mountains. I could take you, but I'm afraid I'm dying. Very good, Al. Very good, Al. Thank you. This poor buffalo, okay, he was dying because he was incomplete. He only had one eye. Aye. And so the buffalo said, I will take you to the misty mountains if you give me one of your eyes. And the mouse said yes. And he gave him one of his eyes. It's that sort of a story. And the buffalo stood up and they started walking, and the mouse was underneath the buffalo. It had something to drink because it could drink the milk on the way. And they walked and walked for a long, long time until they got to the foot of the misty mountains. And that was there that the buffalo left our little mouse all alone. And the mouse looked up and up and up at the rocks and the cliffs, and he couldn't see how on earth he could find his way. He wanted to get to the top. That's what he wanted. Seeing them from there was not enough. He needed to be right at the peak of this misty mountain. Then he heard a voice that said, what are you doing here? I've never seen a mouse here before. He said, well, and he told him again. He told him all the story about how he got there and how he wanted to get up to the top, but he didn't know how. And this voice said, well, I am the wolf of the winding way. I know the way to the top of the mountain. I can take you there. But there's a cost. And the cost is your other eye. Well, the mouse couldn't do anything else, and he gave him his other eye, and so blind, the mouse climbed up the tail of the wolf and sat on the top and hung on to the fur of the wolf as the wolf made its way up and up and round and up and up, and it got colder and colder, and the wind was blowing, and they got to the very, very peak. And the mouse stood there. The wolf went back to its lair, and the mouse is all alone. Can't see anything, but he can feel the ice-cold wind. He can sense the precipice below him. He can't move. He would die. He would fall. And so he stood there, shaking and shivering. And then he remembered the voice of the frog. The frog's voice saying, "Can you jump? Can you jump like me?" And so our little mouse crouched right the way down, and he jumped up in the air, and his fear tore his mouse skin apart, and he put out his arms, and he could now see. He could see below him the land. He could see the citadel in the corner. He could see the river. And his arms had become wings, and our mouse had become a magnificent eagle. Thank you. Oh, so we have Matthew again. I wonder what he's got this time.
Don't worry, it's not more singing. So I thought I would do a story. It's a literary story, and it's by an American writer called H.F. Arnold. And as far as I know, he only ever published 3 stories in his whole life. He may have written more, but 3 were published. And they were published in sort of pulp magazines in the 1920s. And this is, I think, the best one. It's called The Night Wire. And just to give a little bit of context to it, it's set in a provincial newspaper office. And I think that at the time, people were still sort of sending the news across wires via a telegraph system. So I think there would be sort of the major news bureaus in the major cities, and they would send out the stories to the provincial papers over the wire. And that would be done at night so that they'd be ready to be printed for the morning paper. And so there would be somebody in the office who was listening to the coded stories and then translating them into printed type, and then somebody else who was putting the different parts of the story together ready for print. So that's what's going on in the story. So if there's some slightly odd technical language in there, that's what's going on, I think. And as far as I'm aware, H.F. Arnold did do this job for a little while, so I think he had a really good sense of how that system worked. So it's a slightly strange story, and maybe slightly grim, but I hope that you enjoy it. It's called The Night Wire. New York, September 30th, CP Flash. Ambassador Halliwell died here today. The end came suddenly as the ambassador was alone in his study. There's something ungodly about these night wire jobs. You sit up here on the top floor of a skyscraper and listen in to the whispers of a civilization. New York, London, Calcutta, Bombay, Singapore. They're your next-door neighbors when the streetlights go dim and the world has gone to sleep. Along in the quiet hours, between 2 and 4, the receiving operators sit and doze over their sounders, and the news comes in. Fires and disasters and suicides, murders, crowds, catastrophes, sometimes an earthquake with a casualty list as long as your arm. The night wire man takes it down almost in his sleep, tapping it out on his typewriter with one finger. Every once in a while, you prick up your ears and listen. You've heard of someone you knew in Singapore, Halifax, or Paris long ago. Maybe they've been promoted, but more probably they've been murdered or drowned. Perhaps they just decided to quit and took some bizarre way out, made it interesting enough to get on the news. But that doesn't happen often. Most of the time, you sit and doze and tap in your typewriter and wish you were home in bed. Sometimes, though, queer things happen. One did the other night, and I haven't got over it yet. I wish I could. You see, I handle the night manager's desk in a western seaport town. What the name is doesn't matter. There is, or rather was, only one night operator on my staff. A fellow named John Morgan. About 40 years of age, I should say, and a sober, hard-working sort. He was one of the best operators I ever knew, what is known as a double man. That means he could handle 2 instruments at once and type the reports in different typewriters at the same time. He was one of only 3 men I ever met who could do it consistently, hour after hour, and never make a mistake. Generally, we only ran one wire at night, but sometimes when the news was coming fast, the Chicago or Denver offices would open up a second wire. And then Morgan would do his stuff. He was a wizard, a mechanical, automatic wizard, which functioned marvelously, but was without imagination. On the night of the 16th, he complained of feeling tired. It was the first and last time I ever heard him say a word about himself, and I had known him for 3 years. It was just 3 o'clock, and I was nodding over the reports on my desk and not paying much attention to him when we spoke. We were running only one wire, I remember. "Jim," he said, "does it feel close in here to you?" "Why, no, John," I answered, "but I'll open a window if you like." "Never mind," he said. "I reckon I'm just a little tired." That was all that was said, and I went on working. Every 10 minutes, I would get up and walk across to the typewriter and pick up the pile of copies stacked beside it and take it back to my desk to sort out the messages printed out in triplicate. It must have been 20 minutes after he spoke that I noticed he had opened up another wire. I thought it was a little unusual, as there was nothing very hot coming in. Next time I went over, I picked up the copy from both machines and took it back to my desk to sort out the duplicates. The first wire was running out the usual sort of stuff, and I just looked over it hurriedly. Then I turned my attention to the second batch of copy. I remember it particularly because it contained a report from a town I had never heard of. Zebico. Here is the dispatch. I saved a duplicate of it from our files. Zebico, September 16th, CP flash. The heaviest fog in the history of the city settled over our town at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. All traffic is stopped and the fog hangs like a pall over everything. Lights of ordinary intensity fail to pierce the mist, which is constantly growing heavier. Scientists here are unable to agree as to the cause, and the local weather bureau states that the like has never occurred before in the history of the city. At 7 p.m. last night, municipal authorities... More. That was all there was. Nothing out of the ordinary at a bureau headquarters, but as I say, I noticed the story because of the name of the town. It must have been 15 minutes later that I went over for a fresh batch of copy. Morgan had slumped down in his chair and had switched the green electric lampshade so that the gleam missed his eyes and hit only the top of the two typewriters. Only the usual stuff was in the right-hand pile, but in the left-hand batch I found another story from Zebico. All press reports come in takes, meaning that parts of many different stories are strung along together, often with only a few paragraphs of each coming through at a time. This second story was marked Add Fog. Here is the copy. At 7 p.m. last night, the fog had increased noticeably. All lights are now extinguished, and the city is shrouded in pitch darkness. As a peculiarity of the phenomenon, the fog is accompanied by a sickly odor, comparable to nothing yet experienced here. Following that, in customary press fashion, was the hour, 3:27, and the initials of the operator, JM. There was only one other story in the second pile of copy. Here it is. A second ad, Zebico fog. Accounts as to the origin of the mist differ greatly. Amongst the most unusual is that of the sexton of the local church, who groped his way to bureau headquarters in a hysterical condition and declared that the fog originated in the village churchyard. It was first visible in the form of a soft gray blanket that clung to the earth above the graves, he stated. Then it began to rise higher and higher. A subterranean breeze seemed to blow it in billows, which split apart and then joined together again. Fog phantoms, writhing in anguish, twisted the mist into queer forms and figures. And then, in the very thick midst of the mass, something moved. I turned and ran from the accursed spot. Behind me, I could hear screams coming from the houses that bordered the graveyard. Although the sexton's story has been generally discredited, a rescue party has been dispatched. Immediately after telling his story, the sexton collapsed and is now in a local hospital, unconscious. Queer story, wasn't it? Not that we aren't used to it, for a lot of unusual stories come in over the wire, but for some reason, perhaps because it was so quiet that night, the report of the fog made a great impression on me. It was almost with dread that I went over for the next spot of copy. Morgan had not stirred, and the only sound in the room was the click, click of the sounders. It was ominous, nerve-wracking. There was another story from Zebeco in the pile of copy. I seized on it anxiously. New lead, Zebeco Fog, CP. The rescue party, which went out at 11 p.m. to investigate a weird story about the origin of a fog which since late yesterday has shrouded the city in darkness, has failed to return. A second and larger party has been dispatched. Meanwhile, the fog has, if anything, grown heavier. It seeps between the cracks in the doors and fills the atmosphere with a terribly depressing odor of decay. It is oppressive, terrifying, bearing with it a subtle impression of things long dead. The residents of the city have left their homes and gathered in the local church, where priests are holding services of prayer. The scene is beyond description. Grown folk and children alike are terrified, many of them beyond themselves with fear. Amid the wisps of vapor which partially veil the church auditorium, an old priest is praying for the welfare of his flock. The audience alternately wail and cross themselves. From the outskirts of the city can be heard cries as of unknown voices. They echo through the fog in queer, uncadenced minor keys. The sounds resemble nothing so much as wind whistling through a gigantic tunnel. But the night is calm, and there is no wind. The second rescue party, more. I am a calm man, and never in a dozen years spent with the wires have been known to become excited. But despite myself, I rose from my chair and walked across to the window. Could I be mistaken, or far down in the canyons of the city beneath me, could I see a faint trace of fog? Pshaw, it was all imagination. In the press room, the click of the sounders raised the tempo of its tune. Morgan alone had not stirred. Head sunk between his shoulders, he tapped out the dispatches on the typewriter with one finger of each hand. He could have been asleep, but no. Endlessly, efficiently, the two machines rattled off line after line, as relentlessly and effortlessly as death itself. There was something about the monotonous movement of the typewriter keys that fascinated me. I walked across and stood behind him, reading over his shoulder the type as it came into being, word by word. Here was another. Flash, Zebeco, CP. There will be no more bulletins from this office. The impossible has happened. No messages have come into this room for 20 minutes. We are cut off from the outside world and even from the streets below. I will stay with the wire until the end. It is the end, indeed. Since 4 p.m. yesterday, the fog has hung over the city. Following reports from the sexton of the local church, 2 rescue parties have been dispatched to investigate conditions on the outskirts of the city. Neither party has yet returned, nor has any word been received from them. It is quite certain now that they will never return. From my instrument, I can look down on the streets beneath me. From the position of this room on the 13th floor, nearly the whole city is visible. Now I can see only a thick blanket of blackness, where customarily are lights and life. I fear greatly that the wailing cries heard constantly from the outskirts of the city are the death cries of the inhabitants. They are constantly increasing in volume and are approaching the center of the city. The fog yet hangs over everything, but the conditions have changed. Instead of an opaque, impenetrable wall of odorous vapor, now swirls and writhes a shapeless mass in contortions of almost human agony. Now and again, the mass parts, and I catch a glimpse of the streets below. The people are running to and fro, screaming in despair. A vast bedlam of sound flies up to my window, and above all is the immense whistling of unseen and unfelt winds. Now the fog has swept over the city again, and the whistling is coming closer and closer. Now it is directly beneath me. God, a moment ago, the fog parted once again, and I caught a glimpse of the streets below. The fog is not simply vapor. It lives. Beside each weeping and moaning human is a companion figure, an aura of strange and vari-colored hues. How the shapes cling, each to a living thing. The men and women are down flat on their faces. The fog figures caress them lovingly. They are kneeling beside them. They are, but I dare not tell it. The prone and writhing bodies have been stripped of their clothing. They are being consumed piecemeal. A merciful wall of hot, steamy vapor has swept over the scene, and I can see no more. Beneath me, the wall of vapor is changing colors. It seems to be lit by internal fires. No, I am mistaken. The colors are from above, reflections from the sky. Oh, look up. Look up. The whole sky is in flames, colors as yet unseen by man or demon. The flames are moving. They are starting to intermix the colors to rearrange themselves. They are so brilliant, my eyes burn. They are a long way off. Now they have begun to swirl, to circle in and out, twisting in intricate designs and patterns. The lights are racing, each with each, a kaleidoscope of unearthly brilliance. I have made a discovery. There is nothing harmful in the lights. They radiate force and friendliness, even cheeriness. But by their very strength, they hurt. As I look, they begin to swing closer and closer. 1,000,000 miles at each jump, millions of miles at the speed of light. Aye, it is light, the quintessence of all light. Beneath it, the fog melts into a jeweled mist, radiant, rainbow-colored, of 1,000 varied spectrums. I can see the streets. Why, they are filled with people. The lights are coming closer. They are all around me. I am enveloped. The wire stopped abruptly. The wire from Zebeco was dead. Beneath my eyes, in the narrow circle of light from under the green lampshade, the black print no longer spun itself, letter by letter across the page. The room was filled with a solemn quiet, the silence vaguely impressive, powerful. I looked down at Morgan. His hands had dropped nervelessly to his sides, while his body was hunched over peculiarly. I turned the lampshade back, shining the light full in his face. His eyes were staring, fixed. Filled with a sudden foreboding, I stepped beside him and called Chicago on the wire. After a moment, the sounder clicked its answer. Why? There was something wrong. Chicago was reporting that Wire 2 had not been used throughout the evening. "Morgan," I cried. "Morgan, wake up. It isn't true. Someone has been hoaxing us. Why?" In my eagerness, I grasped him by the shoulder. It was only then that I understood. The body was quite cold. Morgan had been dead for hours. Could it be that his sensitized brain and automatic fingers had carried on recording impressions even after the end? I shall never know, for I shall never again work the night shift. Search in a world atlas discloses no town of Zebuco. Whatever it was that killed John Morgan will forever remain a mystery. And I think we have another story from Ruth. I think Vickie's finishing. I think it's you. Oh no, is it Ruth now? Then this is the last one. I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. Another story from Vickie.
Something to lighten the mood after that rather unnerving, spooky story. But anyway, you remember Fran who married the king, and, well, she had nearly a whole year of living the best life that she could dream of. But remember that deal? Yeah, for 11 months. Well, the king still hadn't forgotten about that. And the day before the end of the 11th month, he showed her to the room again, you know, that cold room with the spinning wheel. And he said, "Right, you know the deal. I want 5 skeins at the end of each day. Otherwise, I'll break my heart, but I will have to cut your head off." And so Fran was distraught. I mean, okay, she'd had another 11 months, but she'd been too busy. She hadn't bothered learning to spin or anything. And she took herself away to the back of the castle. And, well, poor Toad, she sat there and she sobbed and sobbed as though her heart would break because, well, Tom Tit Tot, he was certainly not going to come back and help her. What was she going to do? And she sat there weeping. And once more, she heard a knock on the door. "Go away, leave me alone." But the knocking was more persistent. And in the end, she opened the door and, well, there in the doorframe stood a wild woman, hair all windswept, face weather-beaten, but eyes sparkling. "What's going on here then? What's all this to do? What are you crying for?" "You don't care. Go away. No point commenting if you can't do anything to help." "Well, hang on, let's not be hasty. How do you know I can't do anything to help?" "All right, then, come in." And so she told the wild woman all about what had happened, and the wild woman said, "Is that all? I can help you. Not a problem. Yeah, but what price do you want for it?" "All I want is, well, could you give me one of your finest gowns? That's all I'm asking for." "Really? Just a fine gown?" "Well, I suppose I can do that, no problem. I mean, if I'm going to be dead tomorrow, it makes no odds if I give you the gown or not." And so she gave the wild woman the gown. And the woman said, "Oh, but there is just one other thing. Could you hold a party tonight? I want you to invite all of your friends. I want your husband to invite all of his friends, all of those fine and fancy folk, and I'll come to the party." "Yeah, okay," said Fran. And so she went and she said to her husband, you know, it's my last night before I start doing all the spinning, and well, it'd be lovely to have a party, you know, it would set me up in the right frame of mind. And so they organised a party. All of the fine folk came, and every time the door opened, Fran would be looking over his shoulder to see if the wild woman had come, but no sign of her, and the night wore on, and come 2 in the morning, her husband said, oh, I'm sorry, I am so tired. I can't stay up any longer. And you've got an early start tomorrow. Don't you think you should be getting your head down? And she said, oh, please, let's play Blindman's Buff. And just as the game had started, the doors burst open, and in walked the wild woman. And she'd washed herself, and she'd combed her hair and tied it up in a bright headscarf. And she was wearing one of Fran's old gowns, and she looked every much like a queen herself. Who's that? Said the king. Oh, that's my friend, said Fran. And then the wild woman joined in Blindman's Buff. But the wild woman was also a wise woman, for unbeknown to anybody, she had 12 rotten eggs secreted about her person. And every time anybody came near her, she jiffied and she jiffied, and she broke one of those eggs, and it'd be like, oh, what is that smell? Oh, my Lord, you smell worse than my dog. Get away. And then it just say, oh, sir, have you not washed? What have you been eating? Until she had broken every single one of those rotten eggs, and the whole place stank. The king could take it no more, and he stood and said, this place reeks like a farmyard. Who is it that smells as bad as that? Well, the wild woman stood up and she said, alas, I cannot lie. It is I, sir. Well, get yourself home and get yourself washed. Don't come here. I would if I could. I mean, I have washed and I have washed. I have rinsed my hands in rose oil, but alas, sir, I have been spinning since childhood, and I have spun wondrous long time, sometimes creating many, many skeins in a day. And, well, if you've been spinning as long in your life as I have, there's nothing you can do. You take on this smell, and, well, if what I hear about your beloved wife is true, that you have her spinning sometimes up to 5 skeins a day, eventually she too will take on this odour. Well, the king turned and looked at Fran. He said, my dear, if I see you anywhere near a spinning wheel or even holding a spindle ever again, I shall cut your head off. And that is that.
So there is such a variety of stories. So can we have a round of applause for all of us, for Matthew Bellwood, Vickie Orton, and Ruth Steinberg. And just to remind you that we are Stories from the Sofa, or tonight Stories from the Throne. Stories from the Sofa, it will be happening in April. If you're interested in being on a mailing list to get the information for that, just talk to us afterwards. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.